The emergency klaxon pierced through the quiet hum of Outpost Station Aegis, instantly transforming Commander Sarah Chen's routine morning into something extraordinary. Her dark eyes scanned the holographic displays floating before her, searching for the source of the alert. The station's long-range sensors had detected something massive emerging from the outer reaches of the Kuiper Belt, something that defied their classification protocols. "Status report," she commanded, her voice steady despite the flutter of excitement in her chest. Sarah had spent 15 years in deep space operations, but nothing in her experience had prepared her for what was appearing on her screens. Lieutenant Marcus Rivera's fingers danced across his console, pulling up detailed scans. "Object is approximately 3 kilometers in length. Commander. Composition. Unknown. It's not matching any known materials in our database. But there's something else." He paused, double-checking his readings. "It's emitting patterns of radiation that suggest, well, they suggest biological processes." Sarah leaned forward, her reflection ghosting across the transparent displays. The object was beautiful in a haunting way. A crystalline structure that seemed to ripple with internal light, like the aurora borealis trapped in glass. But what caught her attention were the dark patches spreading across its surface, growing like ink stains in water. "Life signs?" she asked, though the question felt almost absurd. They were nearly 40 astronomical units from Earth. The idea of encountering life this far out had been theoretical until now. "Yes, ma'am," Marcus replied, his voice tinged with awe. "But not just one. We're detecting thousands of distinct patterns. The main structure appears to be a single massive organism, but those dark patches, they're something else. Something parasitic." Dr. Aisha Patel, the station's xenobiologist, had arrived breathless at the command center. Her eyes widened as she took in the readings. "It's dying," she said softly, her trained eye picking up details others might miss. "Those parasites are literally eating it alive. And look at its trajectory. It's not random. It's deliberately heading toward our station." Sarah felt the weight of command settle on her shoulders. First contact scenarios had been drilled into every space officer's training. But this was different. This wasn't just contact. This was a cry for help. "How long until it reaches us?" she asked. "At current velocity, approximately 6 hours," Marcus answered. Sarah straightened her uniform and made her decision. "Alert Earth Command, but make it clear we're initiating emergency protocols. Dr. Patel, I want everything you can tell me about both the host organism and those parasites. Lieutenant Rivera, begin calculating potential quarantine zones around the station. If we're going to help this thing, we need to make damn sure we don't endanger Earth in the process." As her crew sprang into action, Sarah studied the mysterious visitor. Through the station's high-powered telescopes, she could see the crystalline entity more clearly now. Despite its massive size, there was something graceful about it, something that spoke of intelligence and purpose. The dark patches were spreading visibly, like cancer across pristine snow. "Hold on," she whispered to the unknown creature. "We're going to try to help you." The next 6 hours would test the limits of human ingenuity, courage, and compassion. What they did here, at the edge of known space, could change humanity's place in the cosmos forever. Sarah Chen and her crew were about to discover that sometimes the greatest adventures begin not with bold exploration, but with a simple choice to help someone, or something, in need. The crystalline entity loomed larger in Aegis Station's observation windows with each passing minute. Dr. Patel's holographic displays filled with cascading data as their sensors gathered more detailed readings. The dark parasitic patches had now consumed nearly 40% of the creature's luminescent surface. "These energy readings are extraordinary," Aisha said, her fingers tracing patterns in the air as she manipulated the 3D displays. "The parasites aren't just feeding on it, they're transforming its biological processes, like they're trying to convert it into something else." Commander Chen watched as maintenance drones circled the station, deploying emergency containment fields. They couldn't risk direct contact until they understood more about both the visitor and its unwanted passengers. "Can we communicate with it?" she asked. Marcus adjusted the station's communications array, broadcasting on all known frequencies. "We're trying," but he stopped suddenly, his eyes widening. "Commander, look at this." The crystalline entity had begun emitting pulses of light in distinct patterns. At first, they appeared random, but as the crew watched, the sequences began repeating. "It's binary," Marcus realized, quickly running the patterns through the station's computers. "Basic mathematical sequences. Prime numbers, the Fibonacci sequence. It's proving its intelligence." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. This wasn't just first contact. This was first contact with something that understood the universal language of mathematics. "Send the next number in each sequence," she ordered. "Show it we understand." The station's external lights pulsed in response, completing the mathematical patterns. The entity's reaction was immediate. Its entire crystalline surface blazed with light, so bright that the station's windows automatically dimmed to compensate. "Incredible," Aisha breathed. "The parasites, they're recoiling from the light display. They don't like it when it communicates." Sarah made a quick decision. "Dr. Patel, focus on studying those parasites. Find their weaknesses. Lieutenant Rivera, work on establishing a more complex communication protocol. I want to know what this thing is and why it came to us." Over the next hour, they developed a crude but effective communication system. Through mathematical principles and simple visual patterns, they learned that the entity called itself the Luminous. It was ancient, older than human civilization, and it had been traveling between the stars when it encountered a cloud of dormant parasitic organisms. "The parasites are called the Void Eaters," Marcus translated, his voice grim. "They consume energy and transform matter into more of themselves. The Luminous has been fighting them for what it calculates as 3 Earth centuries, trying to prevent them from reaching inhabited systems. It's been protecting other worlds," Sarah realized, acting as a guardian, containing the threat within itself. She felt a profound respect for the ancient being. Even while dying, it had thought of others' safety. But time was running out. The parasites were spreading faster now, agitated by the Luminous's attempts to communicate. They needed a solution, and they needed it fast. "Commander," Aisha called out, excitement in her voice. "The parasites, they have a weakness. They can't handle rapid changes in energy states. When the Luminous brightened earlier, they retreated. If we could generate a strong enough energy pulse at the right frequency, we could kill them without harming the host," Sarah finished. She turned to Marcus. "Can we modify the station's shield emitters to generate that kind of pulse?" "Yes, but there's a catch," he replied. "We'd have to drop our own shields to do it. If we're wrong about any of this, if the parasites can jump to the station." Sarah understood the risk. They would be putting everything on the line. The station, their lives, potentially even Earth itself if the parasites escaped. But as she looked at the dying Luminous, still pulsing its messages of mathematical harmony despite its pain, she knew they had to try. "Begin the modifications," she ordered. "Dr. Patel, work with Lieutenant Rivera to calculate the exact frequency we need, and send a message to the Luminous. Tell it to be ready." As her crew rushed to prepare, Sarah watched the ancient crystal being through the station's windows. Humanity had dreamed of first contact for generations, imagining grand diplomatic exchanges or technological revelations. Instead, their first meeting with an alien intelligence had come down to something simpler and more profound: the choice to help a stranger in need. The parasites continued their relentless spread across the Luminous's surface, but now there was hope. In the next few hours, they would either make history or become a part of it. Sarah Chen intended to make sure it was the former. The modified shield emitters hummed with power as Marcus made the final adjustments. The sound filled the station's command center, a constant reminder of what they were about to attempt. Outside, the Luminous's crystalline surface had grown noticeably dimmer, its once brilliant light now struggling against the spreading darkness of the Void Eaters. Energy pulse calibrated to your specifications, Dr. Patel, Marcus reported, his hand steady despite the pressure. But we'll only get one shot at this. When we drop our shields, we'll be completely exposed. Aisha nodded, triple-checking her calculations. The frequency should disrupt the parasite's molecular structure without harming the luminous. Think of it like a tuning fork. Hit the right note, and they'll shatter. Sarah studied the tactical display, where a countdown timer marked the minutes until their shields would drop. They had positioned the station at what they hoped was the optimal distance, close enough for the pulse to be effective, but far enough to give them a chance to raise shields again if something went wrong. New data coming in, Marcus announced, his voice tense. The parasites, they're changing their behavior. Look at this pattern. On the main screen, they could see the dark patches moving with new purpose, flowing together like rivers of shadow across the luminous's surface. What had been random spreading was now becoming organized. They're responding to our energy readings, Aisha realized, alarm creeping into her voice. They can sense what we're planning. These things aren't just parasites. They're intelligent. The luminous flashed an urgent series of light patterns. Marcus quickly translated. It's warning us. The Void Eaters have done this before. They're preparing to jump. Jump. Sarah's question was answered by a horrifying sight. A tendril of darkness stretched out from the luminous's surface, reaching toward the station like a probing finger. Shields up. Abort the pulse. But before they could react, the luminous itself blazed with sudden, brilliant light. The tendril of darkness recoiled, retreating back to its surface. The ancient being was using its remaining strength to protect them. It's buying us time, Sarah said, but it's draining itself to do it. We need a new plan, fast. She turned to her crew. Options. Aisha's fingers flew across her console. The parasites revealed something when they tried to jump. They need to form larger masses to transfer between hosts. If we could force them to cluster together, we could hit them when they're most vulnerable, Marcus finished. But how do we make them cluster without risking them jumping to the station? Sarah watched as the luminous continued its protective display, its light noticeably weaker with each pulse. Then she saw it. The answer had been in front of them the whole time. Light, she said. The luminous uses light not just for communication, but for defense. Lieutenant, can you modify our external floodlights to match its defensive frequencies? Marcus's eyes lit up with understanding. Yes, but we'd need to coordinate perfectly with the luminous. A single mistake, and we could drive the parasites straight toward us. Do it, Sarah ordered. Dr. Patel, explain our plan to the luminous. We need to create a pattern of light and shadow that will herd the Void Eaters into clusters, then hit them with the energy pulse when they're concentrated. As her crew worked, Sarah felt the weight of command pressing down on her. They were attempting something unprecedented, a coordinated attack with an alien being they'd met just hours ago, against an enemy they barely understood. The risks were enormous, but the stakes were even higher. If they failed, the Void Eaters would not only consume the luminous, but potentially spread throughout the solar system. The next few minutes were a flurry of activity as they reconfigured the station's systems. The luminous, despite its weakening state, sent detailed information about the light frequencies that most effectively repelled the parasites. Marcus incorporated this data into their floodlight modifications, while Aisha refined the energy pulse calculations for maximum impact on clustered targets. Ready on your command, Marcus reported, his hand hovering over the controls. Sarah took a deep breath, studying the tactical display one last time. They would have to time this perfectly. Too early, and the parasites wouldn't be concentrated enough. Too late, and they might lose their chance forever. Send the signal, she ordered. Let's show these Void Eaters what happens when they threaten a friend of humanity. The space around Aegis Station was about to become a battlefield of light and shadow, with the fate of not just the luminous, but potentially their entire solar system hanging in the balance. The true test of humanity's ingenuity and courage was about to begin. The void between Aegis Station and the Luminous erupted in a carefully orchestrated dance of light and shadow. Station floodlights pulsed in precise sequences, working in harmony with the Luminous's own luminescence to create patterns that pushed and pulled at the dark masses of the Void Eaters. "They're responding," Marcus called out, monitoring the parasite's movements. "Cluster formation at 30%. 40%. Sarah watched the tactical display with intense focus. The Void Eaters weren't making it easy. They fought against the light patterns, trying to find gaps, testing different directions. But each time they sought an escape route, they found themselves channeled back toward the designated clustering zones. "Luminous energy levels dropping," Aisha warned, her eyes fixed on the biological readings. "It can't maintain this level of light output much longer." The ancient being's surface flickered, its once brilliant glow now pulsing erratically. Yet it didn't give up, matching each of the station's light patterns with perfect timing despite its weakening state. Sarah felt a surge of admiration for their alien allies' determination. "Cluster formation at 60%, Marcus reported. "But Commander, look at this. The consolidated masses are showing new energy signatures. They're adapting." On the main screen, they could see the largest clusters of Void Eaters beginning to emit their own anti-light, creating zones of absolute darkness that threatened to disrupt their careful herding pattern. It was like watching ink spread through water. But this ink seemed to devour light itself. "They're trying to create safe corridors," Aisha realized. "If they establish enough dark zones, they could split up again and we'll lose our chance." Sarah's mind raced. They needed something unexpected, something the parasites couldn't adapt to quickly enough. Then she saw it, a possibility in the station's power distribution readings. "Lieutenant, what if we reversed the polarity of our shield emitters? Not to create a pulse, but to create a reflection field." Marcus's fingers flew across his console as he ran the calculations. "It could work. We could bounce the Luminous's light off multiple points, create an unpredictable pattern that they can't create dark zones fast enough to counter." Sarah finished. "Do it. Dr. Patel, tell the Luminous to prepare for a power surge. When I give the word, it needs to channel everything it has left into one massive burst." As Marcus reconfigured the shield emitters, Sarah watched the Void Eaters continuing to construct their network of dark corridors. They were intelligent, adaptable, but that also meant they could be outthought. Humanity had faced overwhelming odds before and prevailed through creativity and courage. Today would be no different. "Shield emitters reconfigured," Marcus announced. "Reflection field ready on your mark." "Luminous acknowledges," Aisha added. "It's prepared for the burst, but Commander, this could drain it completely. If this doesn't work." "It'll work," Sarah said with quiet confidence. "Because it has to." She took a deep breath. "Execute reflection field." Luminous burst in 3, 2, 1. The space around Aegis Station transformed into a kaleidoscope of light. The Luminous's final burst, more brilliant than anything they'd seen before, bounced and reflected off dozens of points created by the modified shield emitters. The carefully constructed dark corridors of the Void Eaters were shattered, broken apart by light coming from every direction at once. "Cluster formation at 85%. Marcus shouted over the hum of straining equipment. 90%. "Energy pulse charged and ready," Aisha reported. "But the Luminous's power levels are critical. We're losing it." Sarah's voice cut through the chaos. "Fire the pulse. All power to the emitters. Now." The station shuddered as the carefully calibrated energy pulse erupted from their modified shield emitters. It struck the clustered Void Eaters at the exact moment they were most concentrated, most vulnerable. The result was immediate and spectacular. The dark masses began to break apart, not in their usual flowing movement, but in a crystalline shattering. It was as if the parasites were freezing and breaking apart simultaneously. Light from the dying Luminous's final burst shone through the cracks in their dissolving forms, creating a breathtaking display of cosmic fireworks. But they weren't celebrating yet. As the pulse's effects rippled through space, Sarah kept her eyes locked on the readings. Everything depended on what those numbers would tell them in the next few seconds. For several tense seconds, silence gripped Aegis Station's command center as the crew waited for their instruments to make sense of the chaos outside. The space around them was still lit by the afterglow of their desperate attack, fragments of the destroyed Void Eaters drifting like dying embers in the void. Parasite activity. Marcus paused, double-checking his readings. 98% reduction. They're breaking down at the molecular level. It worked, Commander. It actually worked. But Sarah's eyes were fixed on another set of readings. The luminous. Status. Aisha's voice was tight with concern. No energy signatures. No light patterns. It's completely dark. She worked frantically at her console, searching for any sign of life from the ancient being. The final burst must have drained its last reserves. No, Sarah said firmly. Not after all this. Lieutenant, get our emergency power reserves online. Dr. Patel, what would the Luminous need to restart its vital processes? Energy, Aisha replied. But not just any energy. It would need to be precisely calibrated to match its crystalline structure. Too much or too little could shatter it completely. Sarah made a quick decision. Transfer all non-essential power to the shield emitters. If we can modify the frequency of our successful pulse, we could create a resonance pattern. Marcus finished, already making the adjustments. Like jump-starting a battery, but on a massive scale. The station's lights dimmed as they diverted power. Outside, the massive crystalline form of the Luminous floated silently, its once brilliant surface now dark and lifeless. The remaining fragments of the Void Eaters continued to disintegrate around it, their threat finally neutralized. Resonance pulse ready, Marcus reported. But Commander, this will drain our reserves completely. If it doesn't work, we'll be stuck here in the dark until help arrives, Sarah acknowledged. But we didn't come this far to give up now. Execute the pulse. A gentle wave of energy washed out from the station, precisely tuned to match the Luminous's natural frequency. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, deep within the crystalline structure, a faint glow appeared. Energy signatures detecting, Aisha exclaimed. They're weak, but building. The pattern is matching its previous vital signs. The glow spread slowly through the Luminous's form, like dawn creeping across a frozen landscape. As they watched, patterns of light began to flow across its surface, no longer hindered by the parasitic darkness of the Void Eaters. Suddenly, their communications array lit up with new patterns, not the simple mathematical sequences from before, but complex, multi-layered messages that their systems struggled to process. It's sharing information, Aisha said in awe, studying the incoming data. Star charts, spatial anomalies, other forms of life it's encountered. This is incredible. It's giving us everything it knows. Sarah understood the gesture for what it was, not just gratitude, but trust. The Luminous was sharing the knowledge it had gathered across centuries of traveling between the stars. In helping it, humanity had proven themselves worthy of such secrets. There's more, Marcus added. These patterns, it's not just sending data. It's offering to stay, to help us understand what it's sharing. It wants to teach us. The implications were staggering. Humanity's first contact with an alien intelligence had not only been successful, but it had opened the door to a relationship that could transform their understanding of the universe. Send a message back, Sarah ordered, a smile finally breaking through her commander's composure. Tell it we would be honored to learn, and that Earth extends its friendship to the being we know as the Luminous. As the station's power reserves slowly recharged, aided by emergency systems, the crew of Aegis Station watched the Luminous continue its recovery. Its surface now shimmered with patterns of light that seemed to reflect not just its restored vitality, but a new purpose. They had saved more than an ancient spacefaring being today. They had forged a partnership that would change the course of human history. The darkness between the stars suddenly seemed less empty, less forbidding. Humanity had faced its first major test in dealing with alien life and had succeeded not through force or fear, but through compassion, ingenuity, and determination. As Sarah looked out at the restored Luminous, she knew that this was just the beginning of a much greater adventure.